This past weekend, I went to the Wisconsin Regional Qualifier. The main purpose for going was to try to test some new ratios and cards for YCS Pasadena. I wanted to see what new things I could try that was different from my second place deck profile a few weeks ago. To be completely honest, I did really bad. I don't think the deck itself is terrible. I just played like shit the entire day, so I just want to say that this build isn't too crazy compared to that second place build. It's just a little bit different in a few key ways, but I still want to talk about it in today's video just to give you guys an update of what's going on here. And I will say that regional was kind of weird. I was kind of feeling a little bit off. First off, it was in a restaurant, which is really strange. I never had a regional qualifier in a restaurant before, so space was really cramped. It was really tough a lot of the rounds. You have people's mats overlaying on top of other people's mats, and it's just not very fun to play in. Also, it was really warm because a lot of people were crammed into a pretty small room. But I wish I did better, but I didn't. But I just want to talk about the deck. Yeah, I really felt like I was misplaying every single round. Where at the Detroit regional, the only misplay I really made was against the True Draco guy in one game, and at the UDS and the YCS where I did well, I felt like I wasn't misplaying very often. But at this event, I don't know what it was. It's just a new environment, but I just felt like I played really bad. So I was just having an off day, but at least I got to test some new stuff. So I can't talk about that in today's video. I won't go too in depth though, because we've done some pretty in-depth profiles, and I still want to. I'll ask you guys here. Do you want me to still upload profiles where I don't actually top? I don't know. For a while there, I never topped, so of course I'm going to upload them. But now that I've actually been kind of successful over the 50% of the events that I've entered this season, it feels kind of weird uploading a profile where I did really bad. But I'll still talk about it just in case you guys are curious. But I'm not sure if going forward we'll actually do the non-topping deck profiles. Kind of depends, or at least not the Altergeists ones, because we've talked about it for so many times already. So first off, we have 3 copies of Marionetter, 3 copies of Mylusique, 2 copies of Silk, 1 Faker, 1 Concrete, just the standard stuff there. I do actually have some fun facts for these cards, but we'll save those for a video where I actually didn't do terrible, so that doesn't make me sound super stupid, because some of them are kind of weird, kind of fringe scenarios. So if I say them in a video or I do bad, people are going to be like, those probably never come up. So we'll save it for a video where I do good, hopefully. And then 3 copies of Ash Blossom as their only hand trap. I really was considering maining DD Crow up until the night before. I really struggle at regionals compared to bigger events, because regionals you can play against all sorts of random strategies in the early rounds, and it's really tough main decking cards like DD Crow, so Ash Blossom was just a lot safer for a regional qualifier, any small event. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, of course, 2 copies of Duality. You'll notice here that we didn't play 1-for-1, we didn't play Sangan. I know we played Sangan in the second place profile. Maybe that was what was missing. Sangan, he was there for moral support in the second place profile, but he wasn't here for this one. I did terrible, so maybe we have to put Sangan in there just for moral support. But these spell cards work really well. There's a lot of things that Pot of Duality could be, or at least the second copy could be, but I think it's fine. It's the most average card, and I think in a lot of these hands that you have, you just want a card that it can be anything. It can be a monster card, it can be a trap card, it can be a hand trap. Duality really fits that role well. So if we had more copies of Multifaker, probably wouldn't play the Dualities, but for right now, it's the only option. For the trap cards, we have 3 copies of Personal Spoofing, of course, 2 copies of Altergeist Protocol, and 1 copy of Manifestation. So just kind of the standard Altergeist lineup there. Nothing too crazy with those cards. The Altergeist lineup hasn't changed in a long time, so I won't spend too much time on those. And then we have for the Solemns, all 7 of them still. So we have 3 copies of Strike, 3 copies of Judgment, and 1 copy of Warning. 2 things here. I will say that Warning is definitely cuttable. It isn't the most impactful card going second. Judgment and Strike are both pretty decent going second, actually. You can do some pretty crazy things with those cards, and they have a lot of uses. Warning's just kind of an extra copy of the Judgment. It's good on normal summons a lot of the time. It makes your opponent not trigger their effects. There's some pretty cool stuff you can do with it, but it is probably one of the weakest cards in the deck, right behind a couple other cards. But in general, I think that Warning is it's not that it's weak, it's just you have so many cards that do this already where it's not as good. I don't even know if Warning was at 3 copies per deck, if I would cut any of the Judgment or the Strikes for it, just because it's clearly of these 3 cards the weakest link, even though it's the only one that's limited, which is kind of a weird situation. But it kind of underperformed for me. Obviously when you go second, this card is awful, unlike Judgment, which is pretty good because your opponent's going to have Crescendo and stuff that you want to negate. Warning going second is pretty much useless. We're still playing 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation of Ice. Yeah, this card's still really good. I think it is the best generic trap card right now, maybe even better than Judgment in some situations, just because if you're playing a deck that has any trap cards, you want to have the Compulses. This truly is the card that you want to draw going second, even more so than Judgment or Strike or anything along those lines. This thing is just what forces your opponent to Crescendo, because you just target the Galatea or whatever Link monster they ended on. Sometimes they end on the Long Gear too, I guess, but most people are ending on the Galatea. So you just target that, or you can bounce the Sunlight Wolf to prevent the Roar from going off. This card just forces things, and it's just so strong and it's so versatile. I mentioned that playing the last video video where like you can bounce your own monsters and then reuse them with this card. Specifically, you can bounce multi-figure and then immediately trigger it. So this card's just way more versatile than like Crackdown. There was even a game that I won when I got Twin Twisted, and then I can pulse my Link Kribo because I only had 2 back row just to summon a Faker from my hand, where in this case, if it would have been Crackdown, I would have just been pretty much dead that turn, so that would have sucked. And then 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. So despite the fact that I did terrible this event, it's actually the most amount of times I've ever drawn Faker and Impermanence in one tournament, at least since Faker went to 1 or whatever. So I drew it, I think, 2 or maybe 3 times even, which is like more times in one tournament than I have like the past 3 months, but clearly wasn't enough. I mean, you can get lucky with this deck or whatever if you open that combo, and obviously like I won those games, but in general, like you need to play better the hands where you don't just draw broken. That's like the real skill testing part of a deck like this. We also have 2 copies of Lost Wind. I mean, this card's really strong. This is what I've like been wanting to play for a little while now, and I just couldn't find the space for it. But right now, I think it's still like a really good card. This is kind of what I cut the Sangan and the Trap Trick for, and it's pretty good. I actually did misplay a game, and I lost because of it, because my opponent had a lethal setup, and he didn't realize it, but I thought he would realize it, and so I didn't set the Lost Wind, when if I would have, I could have won, because he actually missed his combo. He made an incorrect play or whatever. It wasn't so much an incorrect play, it was just like he forgot about an effect that he had, which really sucked for me, because then like I just assumed it was really obvious, because he could just revive his Harpour with a Symbol Skeleton and then attack for game, but he didn't do that, so I lost because I didn't set a Lost Wind. So that's like a good lesson, a quick lesson. I mean, even when you like misplay, and even though I won that match, like you can always take some lessons away, and the lesson there was that even if your opponent has lethal and you see the lethal, you should still play like they don't, just because sometimes they will miss it. Not everyone plays perfectly. I didn't play perfectly that match. I didn't play perfectly a lot of matches, so it's just worth mentioning. Your opponent isn't always going to play perfect, so don't just necessarily like miss effects just because you think that they're going to kill you, because sometimes they will actually mess up those plays, even if they're not like super complicated. And the last card here is the 1 Imperial Order. Honestly, like I was thinking about cutting this card because it's so bad going second, but it just steals game 1s a lot of the time, so it's worth keeping in, I think. And that's 40 cards for the main deck there. For the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Hexia, 3 copies of Link Kribo, 3 copies of Almirage. If you're playing Crackdown, you don't need the Almirages, or you don't need that many copies of them. If you're playing Sangan, you probably should still keep at least 2 in there, but I'm not. I don't know, I just like want to play as many cards as possible. Like the chances of banishing all 6 of these cards, as a lot of you guys in the comment section of the Detroit regional profile commented, I guess it's like a 0.02% chance to banish all 6 of these, so that's obviously like really unlikely. So if you play 6 copies, you'll almost always be able to resolve Moliseek's effect after Extravagance, which is really good. We also played 2 copies of Prime Banshee and 1 Kidolga, or whatever this card's called. It's actually like a pretty funny combo with this that I'll show at the end, I guess. I mean, like, it doesn't really matter, but if you're not playing Super Poly, if you're not playing Crackdown, you have so much extra deck space, it doesn't really matter. And so there's like a combo with this card if you banish all the Hexias that you can sometimes do to like win some games. It's not the best combo. I mean, it's good when it goes off. It's just like usually if you have the Hexias, it's better to do that play, but it's okay. I'll talk about that at the end though. And then 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and 1 Avermax, just like random cards. Like I said, the extra deck really doesn't matter unless you're playing Super Poly or Crackdown, in which case you have a lot more tough decisions to make. But when you're not playing those cards, like besides the Hexi and Link Kribo, like none of the cards actually matter. Let me try to find my side deck here for the remainder of the deck profile. So we have 3 copies of Lancia. I wasn't playing this card at the last event. I feel like a lot more people right now are playing around the Nibiru, so I just wanted to play Lancia. It's really good against Orcus. Nibiru definitely punishes like the worst players, just like objectively, it's like what the card is so good against. But if you're going to like an event where you're playing good players, or if you're going to an event like a YCS where like a lot of people are playing decks that maybe aren't necessarily like Nibiru is good against, because Nibiru isn't good against like the combo decks that can set up like a negation on the force summon, like Appaloosa, or perhaps like Lunalight Orcus summoning Azathoth. Then the card isn't as strong, but I just wanted to play Lancia just because it's so good against a variety of decks. One of the new cards I was testing out was DD Crow. Like I said, I was going to main deck this card, but it ended up in the side deck. It's pretty good. There were some hands, like it conflicts with the Lancia, but there was like a hand where I probably could have won the game. Once again, just like one of the many misplays I made this weekend, but or this day or whatever. Guess it wasn't a full weekend, but I drew like 2 DD Crow and a Lancia, and I was trying to get him to like a simplified game state. So like he made some plays. I DD Crowed something because I didn't want a Lancia, and then I DD Crowed the second thing, and then I had a Lancia anyway. So I should have just like Lancia'd from the very start and stopped all of his plays. But I thought maybe I could like first I thought like the 1 DD Crow would just make him pass, and then I thought like, okay, well I DD Crowed, so I might as well use the other one, and then I thought that would make him pass, and then he didn't. So I realized I should just use a Lancia. I don't actually, because of situations like that, I don't actually know if you need the DD Crow. If I think about like the last event that I played at, I didn't have either of these cards, and I still felt pretty pretty fine. So I think that one of the issues that I had like too many cards to side in going second, because I also had Nibiru's, and against like a lot of decks, like you don't have the space, you can't really side out this many cards. You're usually siding out like 3 or 4 cards, and you can maybe stretch it to 5 when you're going second against Lunalight Orcus. These 4 cards could probably be something else. I don't know exactly what that'll be, but you guys can see some of the things that I cut here. So for example, I only played 2 copies of Secret Village instead of 3. Probably a mistake. I don't know, this card's like kind of weird though. It's a lot worse against like the current version of Skyscrapers, because that deck plays like 8 trap cards, and it plays Heavy Stormduster now, which is like really broken against this card in particular. I mean, this is a really solid card in general, but I don't know. I mean, I probably would play 3 of this card just because Skyscrapers were like really popular at the regional, which means they could be popular at the YCS, but I just wanted to test some things, so I had to cut it to 2 for this event. 3 copies of Summon Limit. Man, this card like continues to underperform. It's probably like the best card. I don't know, when you like watch deck profiles, people are like, oh, I played Twins so I can out Summon Limit, or I played Cosmic so I can out Summon Limit, and it's like, I get where they're coming from, but I think specifically because people are playing so much back row hate, this card actually is like worse than like maybe even Inspector Warder. It's really good if it resolves, but I think in a lot of cases when you go first with this deck, if you just draw like any trap cards, you usually can just win. You don't need to draw like the Floodgates in particular. So I don't know, and this card like doesn't really cover anything that the other trap cards don't cover, because like the trap cards you play going first are just like so powerful just by themselves. You get so much value out of them. Even if your hand is like bad, you can draw like 4 trap cards and still like win those games. So some of them, it just kind of like has been underperforming for me lately, even though it is like one of the only cards that is good against like Luna Orcus and Pendulums, like that just completely stops them. But I think in reality you could just play like regular trap cards against those decks going first, and you probably could win those. But I don't know, I'll have to test a little bit more. And then 3 copies of Heavy Stormduster. It's still a really good card. It's still just like really strong going first and second against backer decks, but even going first against decks like Pendulums, take out the scales. You know, a lot of them aren't playing Magicians anymore, so they don't have Pendulum Call, so it's pretty good against that deck. That was actually the deck that when I lost to, I dropped out of the tournament just because it like completely destroyed me. This deck, even with like, I don't know, you can side like all 8 of these cards going first against Pendulums, is still pretty weak in that matchup. I know Secret Village might sound weird, but like if your opponent normal summons a spellcaster, you can just bounce it to their hand and then like it stops all their Pendulum scales and stuff. But yeah, that matchup I feel like is one of this deck's worst matchups right now, even more so than like Salamangreats, which in the past I've complained about. It is almost impossible to beat Pendulums if they open a playable hand. They don't always open playable hands. The deck isn't like more consistent than like Pure Orcus or something along those lines, or even Luna Orcus. But man, when they draw like a playable hand, you probably are going to lose like 99% of the time. Just the scale effect of Endymion is almost impossible to negate. You basically have exactly Heavy Stormduster or Secret Village, and I guess if you have like impermanence in the, like you take the 50-50 chance of putting in the right column when you go first or whatever. Other than that though, you have like no ways to stop that card, so it just like completely murders you every single time. Really disappointing. So that matchup's kind of just like an auto loss. Maybe you can like sack them or whatever, but in general I wouldn't take that matchup too seriously, just because you almost always lose. And to not lose, you'd have to like side deck like a bunch of cards like Dimensional Barrier, but then like they wouldn't be very good against other matchups. And because the format is so diverse right now, you can't really have space for those types of cards. Anyway though, that's pretty much my deck profile. Hope you guys learned something from it. And like I said at the beginning, you can always learn a little bit something even when you play bad or even when you lose. I think that a lot of people, you know, they just get salty and say they got sacked or anything. But I would say out of all of my matchups, all of my losses, other than the Pendulum matchup, I definitely could have won every single match that I played. I just made a misplay, and I remember telling, it's no offense, I mean, I think a lot of people have this mindset, but I remember telling a couple fans that, and they were like, oh, that sucks when you lose games because it's your fault. And I think as like a competitive player, it's good when you lose games because it's your fault, because that means you have more room for improving. If you're losing every game to like actual uncontrollable things, it means the game is like too sacky or whatever. But I think a lot of people really don't realize how many games they could be winning if they just thought about the matchup a little bit more. Maybe they like change their deck a little bit. Anyway though, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's deck profile. I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.